Liverpool. He's a professor of European law at Liverpool Hope University. Prof, always good to speak to you. Firstly, your reaction to these election results, a vote widely seen as whether or not the country should be moving closer to the EU or to Russia.
Good evening. Well, the presumption, of course, is that the vote was fair. And it's pretty clear that both sides are claiming victory. I'm not, frankly, surprised that the governing party, the majority, the Dream Party, won on the basis of what the observers in Georgia indicated, or many of them, not all of them, but many of them indicated that there was lots of chicanery and rigging going on. Remember, Georgia is not Moldova. Moldova, it was a little bit more difficult to arrange things for a particular side. In Georgia, it was easier, especially given that the governing party was inclined to support a particular interest.
The EU has called on Sunday for an independent investigation into these alleged irregularities. But how is that also then going to affect Georgia's bid to join the EU? Because the Georgian Dream Party says that is something that they would like to revisit.
I think that the European Union has asked for a rather obvious thing. Let's have an independent assessment of it. But so what? I mean, I don't want to be glib about this, but the European Union does not really have the power, the capacity to dictate anything in Georgia. And indeed, Georgia nearly got us into a lot of hot water, 12, 15 years ago, as I recall, when they thought that NATO and the European Union, like the cavalry, will go along to help them in their war against Russia. And we know what the outcome of that was. So the European Union is going to talk, if you like, the talk of let's see this, let's have an independent review. Ultimately, this will be worked out in the streets of Tbilisi and the rest of Georgia. Will the supposed losers mobilize the population and reclaim or try to reclaim a victory, or will the forces that actually have power in Georgia use the apparatus of the state with the support of the Russians, though obviously undercover, to ensure that the victory, if you like, is, if not legitimized, but accepted?
Who are those powers in Georgia who actually have so much influence? Because many, of course, are saying Russia. You mentioned Russia there in a covert way, looking at things. Because how's Moscow going to be viewing this election? And why is it important for Russia to have Georgia as a close ally?
Look, let's be clear. Georgia has been part and parcel of the last 120 years of certainly Russian and Soviet history. Remember, Stalin was a Georgian, Beria was a Georgian. In many ways, that Georgian culture of power was at the heart of the Soviet Union. It is absolutely clear that Russia, understandably, does not want to lose another part, if you like, of the old Soviet empire. And so they clearly have an interest in ensuring, particularly in that part of the world. Remember, Georgia borders Armenia, Azerbaijan, and of course, Turkey. So, Russia wants to ensure that Georgia does not spiral out of its sphere of influence, if not benevolent acquiescence, if that makes sense. So it's pretty clear that Russia wants to maintain its position there. Remember, they invaded part of Georgia when the Georgians tried to force the hand of NATO in breaking away from Russia. The Soviet Union, or post-Russia, let's call it that way. So I have no doubt at all that Russia has every interest in ensuring that the status quo in Georgia, in other words, that Georgia remains attached, a satellite of Russia. There's no doubt about that. Just as in Moldova, it was the same case. But Moldova geographically is a little bit more distant, historically a bit of an artificial creation, whereas Georgia is part of almost the Russian psyche, a little bit like the Ukraine. But they don't have to, or they tried. They invaded part of Georgia, but they don't have to send in the tanks fully, though. As I'm sure you know, the Georgian government was trying to scare people into saying, look, if we don't vote in a particular way, the tanks will roll into Tbilisi as well. So scare tactics, if you like.
And fear is a very powerful emotion, though, to use on an electorate. But where does this also now leave that coalition movement of opposition parties who came together to try and challenge the Georgian Dream Party? What's next then for them?
I think what's next for them is either mobilizing the street, which means disorder and instability in Georgia, or frankly, the governing party will gradually impose its will, just as it did. And that's why, by the way, the European Union froze all negotiations with the Georgian government over, the new laws on foreign influences, spies, and so on. So really, the opposition, look, the mark of a democracy is that those who lose elections accept that they've lost them because they accept the rules of the game. Georgia is not a democracy. Let's be clear about this, right? And I think ultimately then it comes down to the street. It's terrible to say this, but if you really feel that you won, then all you can do is mobilize the street and hope that those in power will give way, though it depends on their capacity and their will to use brutality to hold on to power. So I dread to think, frankly, what will happen in Georgia over the next 3, 4, 5 days. And I think we need to look at that. But I do not believe it is in the European Union's interest to be too visible in trying to force, if you like, our version of values and democracy on Georgia. It's the Georgians that have to decide for themselves, by whatever means they can, what their future is.
And judging by this vote, it seems that they have decided. Professor Rizzuto in Liverpool, really good to get your analysis. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Good night.